Are there words about a pandemic at this point?
No, we're not at all, and we have it totally under control.
We think we have it very well under control. We pretty much shut it down. It's going to disappear. One day, it's like a miracle, it will disappear. We can hold that down, as we're saying, to 100,000. It's a horrible number. We all together have done a very good job.
As the nation surpassed 4 million COVID cases and over 145,000 deaths this week.
It's something that we have tremendous control of, and I think we're going to win faster than people think, I hope.
You're going to lose a number of people to the flu, but you're going to lose more people by putting a country into a massive recession or depression. The virus is going to disappear. I feel about vaccines like I feel about tests. This is going to go away without a vaccine.
The coronavirus itself, SARS-CoV-2, is here to stay.
As the U.S. surpasses a staggering 400,000 deaths, the incoming CDC director says another 100,000 could die in the next month.
It is what it is. It's going to fade away. We're in very good shape.
And on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate your response to this crisis?
I'd rate it a 10. I think we've done a great job.
Now witness the firepower of this fully armed and operational battle station.
His testicles became swollen.
Hey everybody, Wednesday. Welcome to the show. Around the nation, right here. We got some fun stuff today. Yes, we've got Karen's. We have more of the Mark Milley drama. So I'm going to dive into that a little bit more. We have Larry Elder. Down goes Larry Elder. Oh, look at that. We didn't even do a ladies and gentlemen, but oh well, that's all right. So we've got that. We got MAGA rioters trying to be their own lawyers. How's that going? I'm going to show you. That's going to be a lot of fun. You're going to enjoy that. You're going to enjoy that quite a bit. But before we get into the stories, of course, please like and share the stream if you haven't already. Very important that you do so. It helps us out, as always, no matter where you're listening or watching the stream. We're on Twitch, we're on YouTube, we're on the Facebooks. Please give us a like and a share and also subscribe if you haven't already. Very important. All right, that said, how's everybody doing today? It's a day. We're doing. Let's dive in. Okay, that's weird. But let's go. Got a lot of stories. All right. Hold. The GOP war on facts and democracy continues and has spilled over into the California recall election. So for months, there were people who were pretty unhappy with Governor Gavin Newsom, mostly, of course, right-wingers, who petitioned a recall election and got crushed. So now, full disclaimer here, I don't live in California. I don't really have a lot to do with California politics, but I take it on pretty good authority that Gavin Newsom is a corporatist, that he's not a very good governor, he's not very progressive at all. So I understand why there are left-wingers that were like open to this, right? Like, okay, let's recall Gavin Newsom, right? So now, as this progressed, however, the only frontrunner that actually had a legitimate chance of beating Gavin Newsom and becoming the new governor was Larry Elder. Larry Elder. So now, as bad as Newsom was, Larry Elder's about 100 times worse. The guy called to eliminate the minimum wage. Set it down to nothing. Zero minimum wage, okay? You also had him trying to call to get rid of mass mandates. He even wanted to give reparations to the slave owners, not the slaves themselves, or I should say the descendants of slaves, but the descendants of slave owners. What? Okay. So interestingly enough, the Republican Party actually found a black man so willing to sell out for power that he would support the descendants of slave owners and try to give them money. That's crazy. That's crazy. So now when people realized that Elder was the most likely person to replace Newsom, a lot of the voters, they bit the bullet, and they said, all right, as much as Newsom sucks, we're going to vote no on the recall. And some people, by the way, did write in their own candidates. There was some Green Party representation. Look, that's fine. And look, again, it looks as though Newsom won. He's gonna remain in office. So now another reason that people voted for Newsom to keep him in office is to prevent Larry Elder from taking over, is because you had that whole issue with Senator Dianne Feinstein. So Dianne Feinstein she's ancient. She's on her last legs. She's not doing well. Let's just say that. So now that's not me saying it. Okay, this is people who know her, people that have been in meetings with her, and here's what they say. This is according to a person who had attended regular meetings with the senator over the course of many years, who described an obvious, if not persistent, change in her behavior. Starting under President Obama, I began to notice she seemed confused in meetings. The former government affairs executive who did not want to be identified to avoid causing trouble for the large firm that employed him. But it was inconsistent. Sometimes she was clear and coherent in meetings. Other occasions, she didn't seem to understand the issues, and sometimes even the person with whom she was speaking. So that inconsistency there, that is a problem. And it's, again, like, this is part of aging. She's 87 years old. And sometimes, look, when people get old, things happen, okay? Things start to slip. And that's just mentally. Politically, of course, she wasn't at all in line with the progressive agenda, with the progressive wing of the party. Again, very corporate, very centrist, and not in line with actually the voters of her district, which, again, overwhelmingly vote for her, but understand that it's not because it's really because they don't have any other progressive option. And I show you that because a recent poll by UC Berkeley's Institute of Governmental Studies showed only about 35% of Californians approve of the job that Feinstein is doing. She's not representing her district in a progressive way, and therefore people are like, well, we're not really happy with her. We'll still vote, for her because we don't really have any choice, but we're really not happy with her. All right. So now, the thing that ties this with Feinstein, and why I'm talking about her, is that, well, if Larry Elder had been replaced, if Larry Elder replaced Gavin Newsom as governor of California and something happened to Dianne Feinstein, you would see a situation where Larry Elder would then be responsible for picking the replacement. So that would be disastrous for the Senate, which right now, 50-50. It would have been 51-49, now in favor of Republicans. And look, right now, we have a problem that not a lot is getting done in Congress right now. You get another Republican in there, absolutely nothing's getting done. That's it. Lame duck. Can't do anything anymore. We can't even talk about doing anything anymore. We're done. Disastrous, right? So no doubt that would please the Chamber of Commerce, as well as Mitch McConnell, which is why, look, a lot of right-wingers are like, no, keep Feinstein in office. She's fine. What are you talking about? And look, there are corporate Democrats as well, and Feinstein herself that are super stubborn, like, no, she will retain her position and serve out the remainder of her term and probably run again. No, there is a time to replace people. And when you start getting super confused in meetings and not knowing who you're talking to, well, it's time to go. It's time to retire. I mean, again, she served a very long and illustrious career, and it's time to go, right? Get replaced. Bring in somebody who's a little bit younger, more progressive. All right. That said, Elder knew, I think Elder believed that this was a pretty big long shot and had a plan. what was that plan? Declare voter fraud, of course. Before Tuesday's vote, the radio host declined to say if he would accept the results, reportedly dodging the question when pressed by NBC News correspondent Jacob Soboroff. Let's take a look at that video.
Whether or not you win or lose, will you accept the results of the election tomorrow?
I think we all ought to be looking at election integrity, no matter whether you're a Democrat, an independent, or a Republican. Let's all make sure that the election is a fair election. So let's all work together, no matter what the results are, to make sure that the results are valid and legitimate, and everybody who voted should have voted. Let's all do that together.
Is that a commitment to accept the results of the election tomorrow?
Let's all do that together. Let's all work together on both sides of the aisle to make sure that the election is a fair election.
Look, I know there's a new Matrix movie coming out, and I'm excited for it, by the way. But like, you don't have to practice by dodging questions, all right? You're not the person who has to be dodging things, okay? That's Neo's job, all right? And whoever else is with him. You're not in the Matrix. Stop. Answer the question. And he can't. This is like, oh, I'm not going to accept the results. You know what? Voter fraud, voter fraud, voter fraud. Of course. Because on Monday night, he urged his supporters to use an online form to report voter fraud, which claimed that it had detected the fraud in the results of the recall, resulting in Governor Gavin Newsom being reinstated into office. And so, look, on Monday, again, the problem with that, of course, is that the link was live on Elder's campaign site, even though the election had never even happened. No results had been released. Elder was still campaigning, and nonetheless, they're gonna. He's out there saying that, oh no, the voter fraud. We have detected fraud in an election that hasn't already happened. In fact, here's what the website said. It said in one of the bullet points, statistical analysis used to detect fraud in elections held in third world nations such as Russia, Venezuela, and Iran have detected fraud in California, resulting in Governor Gavin Newsom being reinstated as governor. The primary analytical tool used was Benford's law and can easily be readily reproduced. The site added on Monday afternoon a disclaimer saying it was paid for by Larry Ellett ballot measure committee recall Newsom committee with major funding from Elder's gubernatorial campaign. The website on Tuesday scrubbed all of that. Gone. Look, how can you detect fraud when nobody voted yet? It's almost as if you tried to steal the election by invalidating millions of votes. You lost by millions of votes. Voters rejected Larry Elder by over 30 points. And that same website, by the way, also suggested that voters would have to open their ammo box if they can't trust the ballot box. How is that not stoking stochastic terrorism? It absolutely is. And so what this is this is a big lie. And now Elder has the gall to come out this morning and say, let us be gracious in defeat. We may have lost the battle, but we are going to win the war. So now here's the thing. A good chunk of his supporters think it's rigged. That's Republicans. Republican 101 now is, if there's an election that we lose, it's rigged. If we win, it was a fair election. But if we lose, it's rigged, obviously. Of course. Look, Trump called earlier, was talking to, I don't know, probably Newsmax or something, and said, oh, no, it's totally rigged. Totally rigged. Why can't they understand that they lost because less people voted for them? Look, to be fair, like, I rag on the beanie man, Tim Pool, all the time. Tim Pool comes out and says, well, the reason that Larry Elder lost is because less people voted for him. Yes, I think he framed it as Republicans didn't turn out, which is probably also true. I mean, both things are true. He didn't get enough votes. Republicans didn't turn out. That's it. There's no conspiracy. It's not nefarious. Okay? But again, the Republicans have become the conspiracy theory party. They also, by the way, love to do projection because they are too often the ones that actually do voter fraud, as well as try to cheat by doing artificial voter suppression of minority groups. And that's not to say, by the way, because the California Democratic Party has its own issues with trying to keep themselves into power. Again, both parties gerrymander their districts so they're safe, drawing these weirdo districts. They're essentially, and this is insane, but you have politicians that literally draw their own district. Like, I want these voters because I know they're going to vote for me. And that's why you always get super safe districts. And then, of course, you have back in 2016 in the 2020 primaries, you had the establishment Democrats that definitely put their thumb in a scale for certain candidates, Joe Biden. And really, it was more of an effort to stop one particular candidate, Bernie Sanders. You get a well-placed phone call from Obama at a certain time. And then, golly gee, what happens? You get a bunch of campaigns that suspended and threw their weight behind Joe Biden, who they considered to be the stronger Democrat, versus Bernie Sanders, right before a crucial primary. And then, of course, you have other, examples, not in this in California or anything like that, but like, for example, in Ohio, where you have these groups, the FMI, dropping millions and millions of dollars of just completely dishonest ads during an Ohio primary. You also have issues, again, all over the country, where you have Democratic incumbents that get challenged by progressives, and they keep the voter data that should be accessible by members of the party. They keep it from these candidates so that they cannot, go and actually see who, votes for who and who votes for Democrats and be able to campaign. So none of these things, however, these are not dangerous or as dangerous. Don't get me wrong. I'm not minimizing. I'm not trying to downplay, the obvious favoritism the establishment has for establishment candidates against progressives. I'm just saying that it's not as dangerous as saying flat out that the other side cheated. And not only that, but adding, they cheated, get your guns. You see what I mean? The Democratic shenanigans in their primaries, and again, California Democrats are pretty famous for this, the Democratic Party, it's dirty. And there is an effect of turning off progressive voters. But right-wingers are flat out alleging, no. They literally stole the election with massive, massive voter fraud, busing in people, Chinese ballots, just weirdo stuff. And what they do, and the reason, of course, they originally did that whole voter fraud lie was to get more restrictive voting laws in general elections, in order to basically prevent minority voters from being able to vote. And that's it. And look, now with Trump, of course, that evolved to even something more dangerous, where you end up having groups of heavily armed right-wingers going across the country, intimidating voters at polling sites. Plus, you had January 6th happen. They literally invaded a Capitol building. So obviously, while both are not good for the democratic process, they're also at varying levels of severity. All, of course, are problems. They have different effects, though, and different solutions. And so those are the issues that we actually have to tackle. We want to have a fair vote. We want to have good elections, and we want to have good representatives. So now that said, I'm glad Larry Elder got crushed. He didn't win the recall. But I think he needs to be called out and shamed for his attempt to use this incredibly dangerous narrative, which in this case, thankfully, did not lead to violence, but it has, and it could lead to violence in other places. And believe me, Republicans will try in other places. They absolutely will, just like right-wingers all over the world have been trying the same thing. And I've noticed, like, if America starts doing that, for example, America started saying, oh, everything's terrorism, 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 terrorism. Other governments, more oppressive governments, have been like, oh, we're going to do this crackdown based on terrorism. And now you see right-wing strongmen all over the world that are now saying, well, voter fraud, obviously. So that's dangerous. We do set a precedent in this world, and we got to crack down on the big lie and this entire narrative, this entire conspiracy that has just consumed the Republican Party. Will Pillowman get involved in this? Can't wait for those elder pillow sham rallies and court pillow cases. Oh, I hope so, because I have I have that segment bumper that I want to use. Pillow talk. All right. Before I go on to the next segment here, I just want to thank TYT for the raid. Very kind. Welcome to the show. We're just talking about the California recall. So thank you for joining. Hopefully you continue to stay for the rest of the show. Hello, KF Logan. Welcome. Can we have a new useless cyber symposium? Yes, we will. Actually, it's coming. I think it's supposed to be in October. All right. Pillow talk. It's perfect. All right. Let's move on. We got plenty more stories to get to. Let's dive in. And by the way, Metal Kitty Mom, thank you for the 5 gifted subs. Tier 1 sub. Appreciate that. Much love. Much love. All right. A new book coming out by Robert Costa and Bob Woodward highlighted just how insane everyone around believed Donald Trump to be. In the book, we find out that Joint Chiefs Chairman Mark Milley took the nearly unprecedented step to prevent former President Donald Trump from launching nuclear weapons. So they hit the codes. Like, no nukes for you. You can't launch them at a hurricane. You can't launch them at China. You can't launch them at Joe Biden's house or Hunter Biden's laptop. Can't do it. Not allowed. We're going to hide the codes. All right? We're going to make sure that you cannot use these incredibly devastating weapons. Great. Or, by the way, launch a disastrous military attack on another country. So now Milley, the nation's top general, feared that Trump would go rogue, and he was certain that Trump had gone into a serious mental decline in the aftermath of the election. Milley also feared the president's action might spark a war with China, and in a pair of secret phone calls, apparently these were conference calls, according to the Pentagon. He assured his Chinese counterpart, General Li Zusheng of the People's Liberation Army, that the United States would not do a preemptive strike. Everything's fine here. Everything's fine. We're not going to attack you. Trump's just stupid. It's going to be okay. All right. Well, so now that's not protocol necessarily. So understand that in order to do something that is outside the chain of command, as Milley had done, he had to have been incredibly concerned that something was going to happen, that Donald Trump was going to do something really, really stupid. So he was the adult in the room. And again, Trump believed that Trump was that dangerous, that unhinged, that he would actually do that. And so now a recent interview with Trump on Newsmax really illustrated why people like Milley are worried. Look.
And our country has gone really downhill in the last 8 months like nobody's ever seen before. And you go to these elections that are coming up in 22 and 24, we're not going to have a country left. The election was rigged, and we're not going to have a country left in 3 years. I'll tell you that.
We're not going to have a country left in 3 years. Everything's rigged. Now, look, I understand this is not anything that you haven't already heard. We've heard this plenty of times. We're used to this. We're like desensitized, and we kind of write it off as rantings of a crazy man-child, which of course they are. But the real danger, as I explained yesterday, lies in the people that he inspires through stochastic terrorism. So that's the big danger. But incompetence is also its danger. So, and Donald Trump, you can't find a more incompetent guy. And that led, of course, Milley to do these calls. In fact, the first call took place on October 30th, 2020. That's 4 days before the election. And of course, the other took place on January 8th, 2021. That's 2 days after the Capitol insurrection. And so the calls were prompted by Milley's review of intelligence, suggesting the Chinese believed the United States were preparing to attack, likely over COVID, but also possibly military exercise in the South China Sea, and of course, the Republican Party being super, super anti-China. So now, Milley reportedly told General Lee, "I want to assure you that the American government is stable and everything is going to be okay." just like an assurance, like, hey, the intelligence reports that you're getting that we're going to attack you, they're not true. We're not going to attack you. That would be stupid. That's just the rantings of dumb in chief. All right? It's going to be all right. Quote, we're not going to attack or conduct any kinetic operations against you. All right. So now in the book's account, Milley went so far as to pledge that he would alert his counterpart in the event of a U.S. attack, stressing the rapport they established through a back channel, saying that General Lee, you and I have known each other for now for 5 years. If we're going to attack, I'm going to call you ahead of time. It's not going to be a surprise. So now the Pentagon comes out and says, well, you know, there were calls, but it's not quite accurate. The book's not quite accurate. Okay, well, that said, so you're calling up China and telling them, hey, look, if we're going to attack you, I'm going to let you know, right? Since we're kind of pals, a little bit. Well, a lot of right-wingers, very, very angry about that. And not just right-wingers, of course. You had Colonel Vindman, who called on Mark Milley to resign as a result for breaking protocol. And, of course, Marco Rubio, many, many other right-wingers. In fact, now you have this narrative where it's not just breaking protocol, it's treason. There's some treason. Have you? So, yeah. That, of course, that narrative is driven by Donald Trump. He got on the phone. He called up a bunch of his friends. He called up Fox News and he said, I want you to call Mark Milley a traitor. I want you to accuse him of treason for what he did, if this is true. Okay. So now, look, the president, unfortunately, does have the unilateral authority to order a nuclear strike. That's scary. It is scary. And look, military commanders who do not follow that command would be subject to court-martial. So, yes, President Trump, and any president, by the way, has that authority, and I'm really not comfortable with that. Look, I'm not comfortable with anybody having that, especially someone who's crazy. And so, but in this case, look, Milley was doing this because he wanted to avoid a potentially devastating war with China. And so, look, nobody wants a war with China. I think that would be horrifying. Nobody rational, at least, wants to get into a shooting war with China. And worse, of course, is launching nuclear weapons. They're literally the most devastating weapons humanity has ever developed. And so, yeah, understand, too, that if you're around somebody that's so unhinged in such a high position of power, who can make those decisions that could, in the blink of an eye, get millions of people killed, that's a terrible situation. So I'm going to be honest, if I were in Milley's shoes, or if I had been, I'd have done the same thing. Like, there's no way we can let this guy unilaterally order a strike. No. Again, I don't think that any president should have that power. That includes Joe Biden. That included Obama. I don't think that anyone should have the power to push up a button to devastate large, amounts of the earth and irradiate them for centuries. That's disastrous. And again, even more so, the point is like we need like a reform in that. Okay, there needs to be way more checks and balances to balance that out. Because again, I mean, it was bad enough before that one person would have that power, much less a lunatic. So yes, absolutely needs to change. And really, honestly, we need to denuclearize the entire world. Okay. Remember, he wanted to nuke a hurricane. Yep. To create a shark, like a sharkicane, a radiated sharkicane. God, imagine that. Say that 5 times fast. All right, we got one more story on Milley. Dive into it. Apparently, Rudy Giuliani is pretty worried about a war against white supremacists. Huh. Oh, that's interesting. So now, he said this during an interview on Newsmax, where they were talking about the book Peril by Bob Woodward and Robert Costa. So now this details how General Mark Milley had feared that Trump could take irrational military action after his loss on after his loss in the election and after the insurrection attempt on January 6th. So that's when it got real bad. Now, even before then, he had been making calls to China and saying, look, we're not going to attack you. Just don't worry about the rhetoric coming from Trump. He's dumb. He's a man-child, whatever. Don't listen to him. Okay, we're not gonna go to a war. We're not going to attack you. And then, again, after January 6th, he's like mortified. Oh, no, this guy's got the nuclear button. We've got to do something about this. And so on January 8th, Miller instructed senior military officials not to launch a nuclear strike without his involvement, which again breaks protocol, but the right thing to do. This revelation has lit the right wing on fire. And during an appearance on Real America's Voice, Steve Bannon's show, Giuliani, here's what he said about this and about white nationalists.
The man is some kind of hysteric. He may get us into a war, probably against white supremacists. He'll probably go bomb white supremacists. I mean, the guy, there's something in the screw loose with this guy.
So that's against Mark Milley, saying he's got to go. More likely to bomb white supremacists. Why did your mind go to white supremacists? That's weird. Yeah, why did your brain immediately go to, well, he's going to war against white supremacists? Why is that the first thing you thought of? Like, I'm serious. It's a serious question. But look, to be clear, we shouldn't be bombing anybody, okay? Let's not bomb anyone. Let's not go to war. Now, if you defend yourself, if you're getting attacked, that's a different story, obviously. But again, to that point, China's not shooting at us. Are we economic rivals with China? Yes and no. I mean, for one, obviously the United States wants to stay as the world's economy and superpower. China threatens that. Okay. At the same time, they're also a gigantic U.S. trade partner. And so understand that if we went to war with China, pretty much every single Walmart would immediately fold, which wouldn't be such a bad thing. Or any place that relies on Chinese exports to the country. So again, we have a massive trading relationship. So now the result of that would be massive economic devastation for not only the country, but the rest of the world. And it would have gigantic reverberations in the world economy, maybe even causing a global depression. Not only that, but I think then, you also have two gigantic countries shooting at each other. So it'd be disastrous. So with that calculation, we can't afford a war. The United States can't afford a war. Neither can China. China doesn't want a war either. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants that. Except apparently Rudy Giuliani, who then said this about China.
Treason is in the Constitution. It has to take place in time of war. If the president were to attack China, it would be a war. And he said he's going to help our enemy. I mean, it's absurd. China is an enemy of the United States. We know that. Maybe they don't accept that. They elected a president who was paid off by China. But the reality is, here he is telling China, the President of the United States takes action against you. I'm going to side with you against the United States of America. Second, what he's saying is totally hysterical. The president never made any words of that suggest war against China. The issue that he raised was supported by 50 reports. 50 reports, and it turns out to be true. Of course it came from the Wuhan lab. You have to be stupid not to realize that by the time the president said it.
And now we see why. He's going to continue the lab leak theory. Of course. No, and China bought off our election. No, they didn't. But again, notice the very war hawkish rhetoric from Rudy Giuliani and the right wing, who suddenly now think China, that we should go to war with China. Well, they're our enemy, and it's treason. Look, China's not our friend, but we're also not at war. They're not our wartime enemies, because, again, we're not at war. And what Milley tried to do was try to assure the Chinese government that we're not going to preemptively start a war with them. That's it. And, again, he broke protocol, of course, in preventing Trump from possibly sending in the nukes or a military strike. But, of course, the intent was to protect the United States against a madman. And so, for me, like, intent really does matter. For me, personally. And look, if he does have to resign for breaking that protocol, I still think he did the morally correct thing in order to keep the peace. And I really hope that people will remember that when they talk about General Milley. So now, again, it's the end of that. As I mentioned, lab leak theory that came from Wuhan. COVID was made in the Wuhan lab. Gain of function, Fauci. All right, so now look. The Intercept did come out with a report recently, earlier this month, saying that there was some gain of function research at the Wuhan laboratory on mice. Now, that said, and by the way, it was funded by the NIH, but the NIH said, well, but we didn't explicitly allow for gain of function research, and I should urge you all to read that report. Came out, I believe, on September 9th. But anyway, that said, in their report, they used viruses that were not related to COVID-19 on mice. Okay, so now understand that entire thing is not only really ethically shady, but also very dangerous, irresponsible, and yes, there was funding. Okay, but at the same time, the idea that the COVID virus, that coronavirus, SARS-CoV-2, came from the lab in Wuhan is not substantiated with any facts. The lab leak theory does not hold up. There's no peer review, there's no study on this. According to researchers who looked into COVID-19, the natural origin theory is by far the most agreed upon and credible theory of the origins of COVID-19. So anyway, and again, there are legitimate questions about the origin of COVID-19 and definite issues with that NIH-funded research. And of course, there are people that were less than honest about the said funding. But at the same time, understand that these questions are totally fine to ask. And I think they should be asked, and I think we should investigate. But also know that there are people with political motives that will push conspiracies about this that are based on incorrect information. And again, for political motives. And understand that the best conspiracies always have a little bit of kernel of truth embedded in them for the appearance of legitimacy. And the great thing about conspiracies, and also the worst thing about conspiracies, is that you can't really prove them. You also can't disprove them. You know what I'm saying? And that's really the core. And especially you can't disprove them in the minds of people who already believe it. And they're ambiguous enough, but with just a little tiny bit of truth in there for people to latch on to, that they can persist. And so, yes, that brings me back to Giuliani, right? So now Giuliani, Milley, and Donald Trump, right? So Giuliani says, well, China's our enemy. China's our enemy. They did the COVID. Again, not true. Lab leak, not true, right? And that Trump had the power to start a war if he wanted to. And so if wartime, people like Milley, who tried to prevent a war with China based on a conspiracy theory, well, those are the ones doing the treason. Did they forget about January 6th, by the way? The whole insurrection thing? Yeah, of course. All right, so now understand that they are politicizing this, as they do with everything, at the direct order of Donald Trump. So Trump calls up his friends and tells them to go on TV. They call Milley a traitor, treason, in order to do this. It was, again, legal to do or a good thing to do. It was a good thing to do, yes, to go and stop a madman, of course. Now, again, did it break protocol? Yes, and there could be some repercussions for that. So now I think you can kind of draw a line here with, or a parallel between Snowden leaking documents about our surveillance program in the United States, as well as Chelsea Manning exposing war crimes. Both of those things went against protocol, but were ultimately the right thing to do. And so with General Milley, he, yes, broke protocol and went outside the chain of command, but ultimately tried to do the right thing because that may or may not have prevented a war. And so for me, preventing a war is a net positive, but apparently for Rudy Giuliani, it's not a positive. And so, yeah. Okay. Let's move on. Sometimes you got to break the rules to do the right thing. Thank you, Tyler. I do appreciate it. That is 100% correct. Sometimes you got to. All right. Trials continue for many of the Capitol insurrectionists. On Tuesday, NBC4 Washington's Scott MacFarlane, the leading reporter that's covering the trials, reported on these chuds who decided to attempt to represent themselves in court. And, well, predictably, it went badly. Here's his report.
Brian Mock, who's accused by the feds of an assault against police January 6th, he's pleaded not guilty, but is serving time in pretrial detention. 100 days so far, he says, many of them most recently at the D.C. jail. He told the judge today he wants to represent himself. He says, quote, about the feds, I have found flat-out lies and fraud. That's not me being crazy or extreme. And he asked the judge today to reopen his detention hearing. The judge responded, you can't reopen a detention hearing. You have to file a new motion for a bond review, something a lawyer could have instructed Mock about before today's hearing. Nevertheless, the court has scheduled a new hearing about the issue of attorney representation. That'll happen next week. There's also the case of Pauline Bauer of Pennsylvania, who's pleaded not guilty in her January 6 case and recently told the court she's a sovereign citizen and seeks to represent herself. In one of her filings, she says, I challenge the court's jurisdiction and dominion over a living soul. There's also the case of Zach Alum. He's accused of smashing the window of the House Speaker's lobby near where Ashley Babbitt was shot January 6th. He's pleaded not guilty in his case, but Alum recently told the judge in a court proceeding, I will represent myself. I want prosecutors to offer me a deal now. About the prosecutor, he says she needs to start doing her job and offer me a deal. In his most recent court filing, from a defense lawyer, they update the court that plea discussions are underway. Finally, let me tell you about the case of Eric Beauchene of upstate New York. Beauchene also asks to represent himself. In one of his recent filings, he signs the record and appears to put a red fingerprint next to his signature. His case is pending. The judge has agreed to let Beauchene represent himself, at least for now. But Beauchene says he charges fees to the court. $75,000 for court appearances. $50 million for urine or blood samples. The judge has rejected this fee argument. But he also says he charges $500,000, $500,000, for fingerprints. Is the man who appears to have signed his most recent court filing with a red fingerprint.
Oh, okay. So great reporting by MacFarlane here. I love it. Perfect newscaster voice. So now here's the fun arguments, right? I love these arguments. I am my own lawyer, and I will be charging fees to the court. You realize that's not how that works, right? Literally, like the court does not pay lawyers. You know who pays the lawyers? You do. So are you now charging yourself $50 million? Come on. And now look, the exception, of course, is public defenders. Public defenders are paid by the government to defend you. But you yourself cannot declare yourself a public defender of yourself and then charge the court for you to represent yourself. That's ridiculous. That's not how this works. These are some of the dumbest people on the planet. They really, oh God, they really are. And then of course, there's Brian Mock, as he mentioned, saying that I found flat out lies and fraud. How? That's got to be very impressive while you've been in 100 days of pretrial detention. I would love to see how you pulled that off. Honestly, like how did you go find the fraud when you're sitting in jail, jackass? And why? And by the way, they keep talking about this fraud, right? Oh, we found fraud. We found fraud. It's everywhere. Look at the fraud. Look at the fraud. All you have to do, you could swing a dead cat and you just run into fraud. How come nobody ever really has any evidence to back that up? How come every time that this was taken to court, Rudy Giuliani would not present the so-called evidence? Yeah, I wonder why that is. Oh, that's right, because you can't lie in court. Hearsay is not acceptable. That's not evidence. They don't have evidence. They don't have evidence at all. It's so ridiculous. It's so incredibly silly. My favorite, though, is going to Pauline Bower, right? Who demanded that the authorities drop all charges against my vessel. Your vessel. What does she bring a boat? She just sail right into the Capitol building? Is what's going on here? No, I get it, right? Vessel, body, it is my sovereign spirit vessel. Thank you. Okay, go get your healing crystals, all right? And just calm down. You try to generate a positive aura here. Okay, Pauline. No, she's a sovereign. Again, a lot of these people are so-called sovereign citizens, so they sit there and get to make demands, right? I demand that you drop all the charges. On what authority? On what authority? Come on. You don't have any authority. You were literally at the Capitol building, and you shouldn't have been because you broke into it and started smashing things. You're not part of a tour group, okay? You weren't just there to look at the artwork. You were there to try to stop the certification of a lawful election, an election that you happen to lose. But I know they're gonna throw their fits, and they're gonna cry, and now apparently they've decided the best course of action is to represent themselves. Oh, you want to represent yourself, huh? You want to be your own lawyer? You want to play a lawyer? All right, have at it. Have fun with that one. That's going to work out fantastic. Go ahead. Knock yourself out. Wonderful. Wonderful.
And then they say, is Donald Trump an intellectual? Trust me, I'm like a smart person.
They're smart people. They're smart people. Just like Donald Trump. You got this, champ. Go get him. Go get him. Look, I think we can all agree at this point, they did not send their best. Anybody dumb enough to invade the Capitol building for Donald Trump is probably better off in a padded room or a cell somewhere anyway, away from the public, for their safety as well as ours. Not only are they stupid, but also incredibly dangerous.
Stop with the questions. Celebrate.
We should, dude. All right. Whole thing's ridiculous. Turns out declaring laws don't apply to you doesn't work unless you're rich. That's a fair point. But here's the thing, like a lot of these people are getting lesser sentences, by the way, because they're white, for one. They're white, and they're upper middle class. Sometimes they're business owners. And so you've seen a lot of these people that have the money, that have these connections, get special deals and sweetheart deals and things like that, lesser charges. So, you were just you were trespassing. Oh yeah, that's what it was, and not actual insurrection, not trying to overthrow the government, or interfering in a official proceeding. It's another one of the charges. I think that's what our friend QAnon Shaman, or the Muffin Man, was ultimately found guilty of, and he is awaiting sentencing. So, but that, I believe he's already been sentenced for 4 years. Not entirely sure. I'll have to go back and look that up. But yes, they generally have been getting some pretty light sentences comparative to what would happen with black people. I mean, if they did the same thing. All right. Anyway, one more story here. We're gonna switch to some Karens. Oh, you know what? I have the corrected video queued up yet. Let me just fix that real quick. We're going to do it live. We're going to do it live. A quick addition to back here. Oops. Right. Now we got it. Okay. Let's hope this works. Another Karen was recently spotted in the wild, attacking restaurant workers over masks. So now, according to an Instagram user who originally shared the video, this happened at the Market Broiler restaurant in Huntington Beach, California. And this woman, well, take a look.
Discriminated against you. No! Why don't the girl that just mocked me? They came at me after you. Who are you? You had no balls to stand up for your own employees. You're a fucking trainer. I paid to be here. I paid to have food.
Dude, some of the shit just gotta go.
If you're not vaccinated, you have a mandated responsibility. Fucking vaccine. She's vaccinated. I need to see her card. Oh my God. That's a HEPA violation. You can't wait, she's not wearing a mask. I will sue your fucking asses. She has put me at risk.
Okay, wow. So for one, obviously that lady is probably drunk. I mean, look, she's slurring, she's being completely, absolutely obnoxious. And honestly, I don't know what starts this, right? But I do know she was talking about, oh, you're not masked. You're not wearing your mask. Okay, well, there's a reason for that. In Huntington Beach, back in June, they lifted their mask requirements. So if you want to be in a restaurant, if you're vaccinated and without a mask, you can do that. Now, Huntington Beach also has a big streak of anti-mask sentiment. So, okay. Now, funny, because she is yelling about masks, right? About how nobody's wearing a mask. Is she masked? Is she wearing a mask? That's odd. Very, very odd. Very strange, right? But now, of course, again, she's yelling at people. She's obviously being super obnoxious, and she's knocking stuff over. So, doing a little vandalism there. But it actually gets worse because then she decides that she wants to go in the full assault mode. Take a look.
Wow! What? I'm fucking okay. You ain't cool. Make sure she wears a mask. What is wrong with you?
Oh, whoa.
Don't fucking come up, please. Hey, don't fucking put a mask on
Yeah, she's going to battery control.
Where's your mask? No mask.
Go home, lady. Go.
I'm vaccinated, bitch!
Whoa.
Why are you doing this? You're doing it! No, get this puppy! Get this bitch away from me!
Wow. Okay. Unbelievable meltdown. Wow. So, yeah, is she mad that people aren't wearing masks while she doesn't wear one? I'm confused. I am confused as well. Absolute meltdown. Again, regardless. Okay, so let me lay down the bottom line, okay? Regardless of what side you're on, pro-mask and pro-vax, which is the correct side, by the way, you should definitely wear your mask and vaccinate. And so, you know, if you're on that side or you're on the other side and you don't really care about other people, well, still, that's not an excuse to act like an ass to restaurant employees. Okay, and that's the thing. Bottom line, the servers there don't make enough to deal with your bullshit. Okay, that don't it doesn't matter what side you're on. Do not attack working people for doing their jobs. That's it. If the restaurant asks you to wear a mask, you wear a mask. If you're uncomfortable with people in the restaurant that are not wearing a mask, then you can go somewhere else. Okay, but that is more safe. Sure. And I do think, again, this is the rules in Huntington Beach. Okay, if Huntington Beach says, well, you don't have to to wear a mask in the restaurant, well, okay, that sucks, because I think we should, you know, have mask mandates and things like that. The rules are the rules. Don't attack the employees for enforcing the rules. That's it. That's it. Huntington Beach rules, right? Again, you know, very likely most of the people in the restaurant are vaccinated, and some of them are wearing masks in line with the rules of the city. You can see some that are not. Sure. But again, Huntington Beach rules, right? They lifted their mandates. Doesn't mean that you shouldn't wear a mask. You probably should. You're just not required to. But by the way, the business can request you to do so, even if there is no mask mandate in a lot of places. So that may have been what started this entire thing. I have no idea. I have no idea. But again, the point is, her behavior is absolutely unacceptable. You don't assault employees that are doing their jobs. And by the way, that the person that was on the phone was being attacked with a cleaning solution being sprayed in her eyes. There's no, I'm sorry, but there's absolutely no excuse to do something like that. Even if you are right in the policy of masks and vaccination, don't do that. Don't attack people. Don't attack people doing their jobs. It is a crime. It is a crime. And so, by the way, that person that was sprayed, I believe that was a manager. Well, she called the police. Now, after the video, the woman did walk out, but later reports on Facebook suggested that she had been arrested. I don't know what the charges are. I don't know if that's entirely true. I would hope so, because what she did was assault. And so you don't assault people. That's just something that you don't do. Okay? The lesson here is, don't be an ass. Don't attack people for doing their jobs. This is not hard. It's just called being a decent human being. Yes, the crime parts are still crime. Right. Okay. I think I'm fairly clear about that. All right. Be a civilized person. Don't be an ass. Not only assault, but battery as well. If it was a chemical spray, then potentially attempted murder. But sometimes people like her really ask for it. If we had literally any other president in recent memory when COVID began, we'd almost certainly be far beyond where we are now. The only reason mass vaccination are issues at this point is because of Trump and the normalization of bigotry, racism, fascism, and lunacy. I mean, generally, yes, but we have to go back to like traditional trends and look at what happened when we were going through other pandemics. There has been a long list, and I've talked about this before, of times where people were anti-vax and put the country, of course, in danger in worse diseases. And so, I mean, there has always been this anti-vax ridiculous sentiment from people who don't care about other human beings. And that sucks, and that's sad, and we need to and you're probably right that it seems like it, or it's probably is a bigger chunk of the country, because you have Trump and you have social media and you have, you know, all these people that are out there spreading this terrible propaganda. Yes, you can find anti-mask pictures from the 1918 pandemic. Absolutely true. Absolutely true. And that's what I'm referencing. And of course, you had, you know, people who are anti-vaxxers against the smallpox vaccine and things like that. And so, unfortunately, this country has a long history of anti-science sentiment and anti-vax sentiment. And all we got to do is we just got to do our best. You know, we got through the 1918 pandemic eventually, and we did so with mandates. In big part, government action, government involvement in mandating and making it, and this is my position, making it so inconvenient and annoying to not have a vaccine and not wear a mask that they give up and say, okay, fine. We'll do the thing. Fine. And that, of course, involves flying. And that involves, you know, restaurants. That involves going back to work, businesses, schools, and things like that. So, all right. All right. Hey, quit spamming the chat. Timed out. Like, no, like don't spam the fucking chat. Like, you're being an ass. What did I just tell people? Don't be an ass. That's being an ass. Spamming is asshole behavior. All right? Jesus Christ. Next time's the ban. I even agree. Whatever. All right, anyway. That's all I got for the show. Thank you for going around the nation meet today. Please like and share the stream if you haven't already. Tempedan918, thank you for resubbing for 1 month to tier 1. Appreciate that. Thank you for the new follows. I really appreciate that. Octo Squiddies, thank you for resubbing for a month at tier 1. 6 months, appreciate that. Let me do this.
Please clap.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the new follows. Dragon Princess, Fortnite Dad 56, Farley the Legend, Mob Hunter 86, Sneakerhead X23, Matty Dragon, and Star. Those new follows on Twitch. Everybody, please follow us on Twitch. We're live every 4 p.m. Eastern. We do a good show. So please give us a follow. Check when we're online. Check us out. All right. That said, thank you all. Appreciate you. Love you. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, everybody. See you tomorrow, right here, same time, same place.
Stop with the questions. Celebrate.
Wet ass keyword.
It's like a shark in 8 hours after food.
You're kicking me out the door. You're kicking me out the door.
Stop with the questions.